Hello, and welcome to this dialogue with Kriti Sharma about ecology and the interdependence within biology. My name is Charlotte. I'm 19 years old from Norway, and I recently graduated from UWC Pearson College.
Hello, my name is Alicja. I'm from Poland, and I'm a fresh graduate from UWC Pearson too. So I think I will start with my question because we wanted to start a little bit broad and learn more about your background. So, what actually inspired you to join sciences and humanities in your studies?
Yeah, thank you for that. I didn't really seek out to be a scientist at the beginning. So I was actually a Pearson graduate myself, and so remember it really fondly. When I was there, I did take biology and um, English and anthropology, and so I had a really lovely kind of broad base to choose from. And at the time, I really thought, like many people at Pearson, that I would go into something like international development or journalism or something to, in this vision of changing the world for the better through some of these nonprofit or fields. And so my undergraduate was actually really very liberal arts, I guess. Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies is what I did. After I left Pearson, I went to the University of North Carolina and I did my undergraduate degree there. And while I was there, I really started I'd always loved biology, but I really wanted to sort of ground myself in politics, changing economic systems, this kind of thing. But during my studies, during undergrad especially, I was really, and actually beginning at my time at Pearson, I really was seeing that there's something very deep and interconnected about the way in which the natural world is conceived and how that sort of limits, in some ways, our imaginations about what's possible in the political, social, economic world. And so, for example, I'm sort of seeing in my classes how my economics classes were referencing my ecology classes, so for example, and the other way around. So my ecology textbook in undergrad was called The Economy of Nature. And so it was already conceiving of nature as kind of this sort of trading, um, capitalistic society where things are scarce and where everyone is sort of buying and selling in a certain way. And it made me wonder, what is there like really an echo between these fields, or is this partly kind of the ways in which the ways we think about nature constrains the ways in which we can think about the our world or our human world? So I got really interested in that question, and I really thought that biology as a field, in some ways, has so much potential. It really, um, yeah, it's this way that it interacts with other fields. I thought was super interesting, and I wanted to really see for myself and learn for myself kind of what was happening in the natural world, and to be able to tell different kinds of stories about life and about what that means for our own lives together, I think, on this planet.
You kind of touched on this, but like for me, it's hard to grasp the concept of everything being interconnected, but because it seems so complex and technical and really beyond my high school knowledge. So, like, what do you mean when you seek to expand the view that phenomena are interdependent and like mutually constituted beyond biology? Like, how do you see like the interactions in the biosphere, where everything in the interdependent, and how could this change like other systems, like economic and political systems?
Yeah, great question. I agree with you that I feel like the idea of interdependence can feel really overwhelming because it's like, oh, wow, does that mean that we can't look at things in their parts to understand them better? It can sort of, the image that comes is sort of like of this massive web, right? Maybe the internet has been a big metaphor for us. You just see a bunch of things connected. And my hope in my writing, so as you know, I'm the author of the book Interdependence, Biology and Beyond, and I really hoped in a way to um, not simplify the concept of interdependence, but make it something that's not just about the tangle of interconnection. So it's true that we can kind of map out the world as like different objects, and then there's lines between them, basically. But the way I'm sort of thinking about it is still complex, but it's not so much. It's not exactly about the fact that there are all this big web. It's more about the way in which we bring each other into being. So, for example, um, my relationship with something like a flower, I think that it's outside of myself, but there's a way in which the redness of the flower, or the fact that we call it a flower, the fact that it sort of stands out to us as something that's worthy of being called like an object, or we call it an object, but really the flower changes from microsecond to microsecond. It's not really one thing that's bounded in time. It depends on me to say, oh, okay, the boundaries of this thing are what constitute an object. But if you look at the atomic level or any level, really, it's not by itself. It's not saying I am an object. That's us, that's kind of doing that work, that cognitive work. And so I think this way in which perceiving beings, conscious beings like humans, and I would extend that to other beings, the way in which sentient beings um, are are participants in the world, that we really bring forth a world through our cognition, through our language, through what we decide collectively matters as objects, or as things that are worthy of study. So this is what I mean about mutual constitution, this sort of deep interdependence, the ways in which we're not just a bunch of objects that are interconnected, like I'm definitely an object, you're definitely an object, and maybe sometimes we meet. It's really more that we're bringing each other into being. So more like this kind of infinity symbol that goes back and forth, or something, that brings us all into being. And so that is a somewhat complex idea, but the implications are, one, sort of different ways of thinking about reality, nature, science, and about the economic and the political, that actually we sort of are born into this world and we're told this is the way the world is, like this is, we live in a world of scarcity. There's not enough to go around. If you want to get ahead, you really have to hustle in this way. Nature is this way. It actually is made up of objects that are exploitable fundamentally, and that exploitation is actually justified in the language of their objects and we're not. And so all of this work goes into turning the natural world into a bunch of objects as well. And I think that's deeply related to political, social, economic, and ecological um, crises, and also movements of our day. And so I believe that this vision of mutual constitution can help us take more responsibility in a way for what we call natural or real, or outside of our, to sort of see the ways in which there's been a lot of projection upon the natural and the real, and the possible. We say, oh, this is possible, this is impossible. But actually, if we see ourselves as bringing forth the world in which we live, then a lot more opens up in terms of what is possible. So we don't become constrained in advance by this very heavy view of nature and reality.
Thank you so much. That was
Yeah.
very interesting approach, and you explained it very well. I
You.
wanted to touch a little bit of something you mentioned, because you listed kind of your courses that you took while at Piercer:
Yeah,
anthropology, English, biology, and as a fresh graduate, you wouldn't be able to leave this conversation without like asking more
of
more
course.
about education and your background. So, how do you think like right now, or maybe when you were also at Pearson, education, especially at the pre-university level, prepares students to go into this highly interdisciplinary world of research studies, and how it
Mm,
opens up their minds to actually seek these connections and not only focus on very small areas.
yeah. Oh man, such a good question. Yeah, I mean, I really do credit my UWC and my Pearson education with, I think, with my interdisciplinary approach. I think it's not that everyone who goes through this kind of education has this approach, but it really made a difference to me, to have sort of these synthetic courses that go across disciplines like theory of knowledge, and it's taught in many different ways, but for me, it did represent this moment where you can kind of step back and ask, what does knowledge mean? How are different knowledge fields interconnected? To take a bird's eye view or something on ourselves as learners. And that did help me think in an interdisciplinary way. I really credit my anthropology teacher at Pearson, Nico Bethel, who anthropology, like, first of all, as someone who is pre-university, I don't think I've ever met anyone who's gotten to take anthropology, I guess, before they went into undergraduate. And that was really big because I feel like getting to take that class at Pearson, which of course is, bringing together people from all over the world, um, it really offered this moment to be able to think very critically and deeply about what do we mean by culture? How is it that culture actually can, how our cultures and our worldviews shape the world? So it really blew my mind, honestly, because I thought I was sort of entering the world in this very unmediated way. I was like, well, it is what it is. Um, and everything can sort of be understood through my lens as someone who grew up like in Canada, North America, as someone who, kind of thought I knew what the world was. And through anthropology, I saw that there were just so many ways of being in the world, and that also that there's a rich tradition of looking reflexively, like reflecting on our own cultures and looking at the ways in which they guide or constrain or open up various ways of looking at the world. And so, yeah, that was big. That I think there's a way in which education can both teach you a lot about the world, like, taking something like biology. It's like, okay, we're going to learn about blood cells, we're going to learn about plants and fungi and about, all these things. And so then again, we're approaching them as objects in the world that we're now learning about. But this kind of meta approach that was provided by theory of knowledge or something like anthropology that said, well, how do you know that? And what are all the assumptions that went into the way that you look at the world? I think those are the ones that I think are super important for pre-university education, university education, and can really help with thinking in an interdisciplinary way.
As someone who took IB marine science myself, I find it really interesting to read about your current work on microbes on the seafloor. And I read some excerpts from an article that you wrote about it. And I'm wondering then, what do you find personally important and interesting about your current work? And more specifically, has it changed your perspective on the exacerbating ecological crisis that we're in?
I love thinking about microbes at the bottom of the ocean. I've, spent some time at sea, and research cruises where we, literally send robots down and look at the bottom of the ocean and collect sediments from the bottom of the ocean to study the microbes there. So this has impacted me in a lot of ways. One, it's opened up this sort of like rich field of imagination. Like, I really can see the bottom of the ocean. So like when I close my eyes or go to sleep, I sometimes see it, and it gives me this feeling of a very vast, very quiet place, and where a lot is going on, but it's very quiet and it's very, of course, mysterious in many ways, and is also just the way in which my current laboratory studies this is the orphan lab at the California Institute of Technology, or Caltech. We do look a lot at methanotropy, meaning how methane eaters, basically the microbes that consume methane, are basically keeping it from reaching the top of the ocean or being released into the atmosphere. So I think of it as kind of the study of how something goes right every day. That there's these microbes at the bottom of the ocean. Most of us are not thinking about it all the time, but because they're doing what they do, we are living in a world that in an atmosphere that is breathable. We're living in a world where there's not a ton of methane. There is a lot of methane that's going into the atmosphere due to human activities and natural processes. But there's this way in which, because they're doing their thing, the world is not already, in a climate crisis in this particular way, that there's not, it's not overflooded with methane. So it makes me think about all of the sort of quiet, in some way, quiet, sometimes unappreciated, subtle ways in which we're being supported all the time and just being alive. And it's a real pleasure and honor to be able to witness these places and to sort of be with these organisms. So a lot of my primary technique is microscopy, that I spend a lot of time at the microscope, and I really, really enjoy it. It's very beautiful, very aesthetic, and it really allows me to kind of to be with the microbes and to sort of observe in a way that's a little bit less mediated by, it's like kind of sitting back and observing in a way. And even though scientists, are taught to ask, to make hypotheses and test them, and I definitely do that. I think this moment of observation and kind of just being a little more open-minded about what might be going on with microbes can really help um, help us sort of, again, see nature in different ways and not jump too quickly into thinking that it's already understood.
Thank you for that. And both Charlotte said Charlotte is taking marine science, and I also took it. So I fully agree with the dreaming about the ocean part, because after some of our field trips, it truly felt like that. And thank you for sharing your current work and your background. But I wanted to also ask a little bit about the future. What are your next steps for your work? What area of research do you want to go into? And maybe what is the goal that you want to achieve with your work? Is it any particular invention, maybe like next books that you want to write, or anything that you're really striving for?
Yeah, thank you. It's a wonderful moment for that question, because I just signed on officially for a job, a faculty position at the University of California, Santa Cruz. So I'll be started this fall as an assistant professor there, and it's a really, really interesting position. Like, I couldn't have dreamed of it myself until I kind of saw it, and I was like, oh, this is sort of perfect for me, because it's a very interdisciplinary position. So it's uh, it's called a professor of critical race science and technology studies. So it's housed in the Division of Humanities in the Department of Critical Race and Ethnic Studies. But it's also about science. So I would have, like an office in the humanities and a laboratory in the sciences building with, microscopes and, a place in the coastal biology um, region, part of campus, where we would be cultivating seagrass and studying seagrass. So that's a whole other part of my work, which is about how coastal seagrasses are sort of sequestering carbon, and and the microbial denizens that kind of help them do that is part of my research right now that I want to continue into the future. But yeah, this super intersectional, interdisciplinary type of position at the university level is just like not really very common at all, and it comes from a long tradition at University of California, Santa Cruz, where for quite some time a bunch of um, actors, faculty there have been working on this intersection of science and justice. So there's a Science and Justice Research Center there, and that is doing really wonderful work on really thinking about, can we do science differently? What does it mean to do science with really thinking about justice in mind, and considering at the level of day-to-day research what the equity and justice implications of scientific research are. So I will be really deeply involved in developing an undergraduate minor, so a course that undergraduates can take on science and justice. So people in the STEM fields can take it and think more deeply about how their research and their future can contribute to sort of both science and justice. And then, of course, for humanities and social scientists majors and folks, if they don't want to do, and many people for good reason are doing a bunch of other things, which are really, really important. Like, if they don't want to do science and be in the STEM fields, then but still have some interest in it, then there's this way of kind of bridging that and feeding people's interest in science. And I really think that sort of, um, yeah, that sort of intersection. It's again something that I couldn't have really come up with myself, but now that I've seen this position, it feels really perfect for me, and I'm excited to build that program, to be with these particular colleagues, and to do all kinds of things. You know, to really to have a laboratory that feels really capacious, really open and thoughtful about collecting data, yes, and observing the world, but also having a really strong theoretical, critical understanding of what's going on with research. Why are we asking these particular questions? How could we be with organisms in a different way that maybe opens up more about who they are and what they're doing than some conventional scientific approaches? So it'll be, I think, a space of a lot of experimentation, both in terms of doing experiments, but also experimenting on ourselves and seeing how we can do science differently. And I'm also really interested in. So I just finished a book, a co-authored book with um, Arturo Escobar and Michal Osterweil, who are wonderful friends and colleagues of mine from the University of North Carolina. That's in press at Bloomsbury, UK, and they're anthropologists, global studies folks, and the name of that book is called Relationality: Remaking and Restoring Life. So super excited about that, and but now it's kind of a past project in the sense that it's finished, but we'll be talking about it in a lot of different venues and keeping that conversation going. And it's more about these kind of implications of interdependence. So it's kind of the first questions you asked about what does this view do for us politically and economically. And then my next book, I really want to be working. I have a title for it. It's called "If This Is What Survival Means, I'm Not Afraid to Die: Biology Beyond Scarcity," and yeah, something like that. Biology beyond scarcity, struggle, and yeah, and I think so. It trails off because I'm like, I'm not sure what the subtitle is, but the point is that it's about looking at the way we think about survival, or the ascendant view of survival, as as competition, as sort of a zero sum game, and asking, what are the ways in which looking at the microbial world, really drawing on my years of experience in microbiology and microbial ecology, to reinterpret in some ways what's going on with the microbial world and what it could teach us about different ways of looking at survival as not individual but collective, and looking at sort of the brave leaps that organisms are taking to kind of when they think this is the only way that they can survive, somehow something happens and there's this big evolutionary transition and they survive differently. And I think that that's what is going on with us as a species, that we're sort of a species in transition that's sort of at the limit of this particular mode of survival under late capitalism. And we don't know, that the future looks really impossible. It looks like, wait, how are we going to get beyond this in many ways? But I take a lot of inspiration from the fact that we're not the first species to have gone through some major transition in how we live, how we survive, that we can look to other organisms and to sort of natural history, to many, many stories about um, the various organisms that we're in kinship with. And we can see some hope for, yeah, a different mode of survival that is far less exploitative and is capable of actually supporting everybody.
Thank you so much. That sounds super exciting, and the science world is really lucky to have you there.
Oh, thank you so much.
So finally, do you have any questions for us? I mean, we both went to the same high UWC school, Pearson, and both went to
Yeah.
IB. So we have some similarities, even though you're already doing far greater things.
Not at all. I'll be interviewing you shortly. I just know it about the amazing things that you're doing. Yeah, no, I'm just really happy to talk with you. And again, it means a lot to me that you would take the time in this moment that is, just at this moment right after graduation, that I know, like for me, was so tender. And I also was part of a sailing trip, around the not at Salt Spring, but some of the islands right near Pearson for 3 days afterwards. And I just felt like it was such, I don't know, it was so deep, it was so emotional, it was like such a sense of the unknown. So I think my first question is just honestly like, how are you doing? How are you doing with all that? You don't have to talk, in a you can share whatever you're comfortable with, but I just wanted to check in with you because I know that's a big deal. Um, and then otherwise, yeah, I would really love to hear about your perspective on what you think, like what you see as sort of some of the major issues, crises, of our time that you might want to like intervene in some ways, and also what gives you hope, since that's one of the big themes of the of what we're talking about today. So again, that's a lot of different questions, but I really am so curious about what you all have to say.
I can start. Right now, I'm in Vancouver for the
Oh
first
yeah.
time actually in these 2 years. Like, I haven't
Oh wow.
really get the opportunity to come here, probably because of the COVID years and that we were a little bit locked on campus. But now
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm really enjoying the city with my friends. So I fully agree with you that like days after the graduation are very emotional, and everyone is just trying to understand where they're standing right now. Like, for me, it's
Yeah.
still shocking that most of the people is either still like either already at home or just Victoria, Vancouver, like they're not on campus anymore. So
Yeah.
still processing that slowly. And about your second question, more about like hope and I don't know, like goals or areas that I'm interested in. Um, I really, and I think like I tried to explore that more while at Pearson, is how we can design things better to improve our world, and it comes from like both from sustainability and everything else. Like, it reminded me when you were talking about TOK and anthropology and all these subjects that are kind of trying to make you understand how things work and are connected. It reminded me of my EE and my
Oh
talks
yeah.
with Laura, the marine science teacher, because she was my PE supervisor and I was doing biology and economics. So it was actually really, really connected. And I think
Oh wow.
all these moments when I was researching it and talking about it really made me think that, like, if I'm doing something in the future, is it like university or afterwards, I really want to grasp on more things than one, because I think it's like it makes me more comfortable to study that and actually see the connections. Um, I'm
Yeah.
still not sure exactly what I will be doing, but I'm fine with that. I will just go and explore and we'll see later, I guess.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
lovely. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm also trying to reflect upon like this 2 year experience of very intense schoolwork, but also very intense living conditions and so many impressions over 2 years. And it's really hard to difficult to grasp how much we learned and how much we've grown in only 2 years. And like like reflecting upon my learning and the relationships that I built, it's like it's unbelievable, really, how like much this has felt like a fever dream, and how we've been so lucky to like learn so much from our environment, from the place, and but also from people there. And people at Pearson have been like not only changed my view a lot, but also been very like supportive in my learning, and also supported me a lot through life. And it's hard for me to feel like I can give back to what Pearson has given me. So I also hope to do like lots of cool research as you're doing, because I also want to go into natural sciences, more specifically like geosciences, which I'm planning on going into, and climate studies. And I like you have hope for the future, and I want to like not only engage in the science world, but I besides school, I also engage a lot in politics, and I see like natural scientists as has a very position like important position in changing politics and showing like everything we learned about the world and the earth, it's so important to input this into changing political and economical systems. And I think like you have a very important voice in changing current economical systems. And like I'm very engaged in climate crisis, and I hope that we have politicians in the future that really take it seriously and that can show very recent perspective on it. And like just reading about like and hearing about your what you learned from microbes on the seafloor and just these very philosophical views of it, it can really change people, I believe. And you have a lot of wise things to say. And I really hope that when I one day become a natural scientist myself, that I can provide equally beautiful, reasoned, and like transformative views as you're done.
Oh my goodness, I'm so touched. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate both of you sharing again in this moment. It means a lot to me. Yeah, I'm just delighted. So please do stay in touch. I know, we might be getting to the end of our conversation, but I sincerely mean that. What you're saying about design, Alicia, I think like this new book that I put out is part of a series on design and on sustainable design. It's called Designing in Dark Times. So I'd love to, stay in touch about that and about anything else that's on your, however your amazing future unfolds. And Charlotte, of course, I'm in a geosciences department right now, geological and planetary sciences at Caltech. I call myself a geobiologist. I think that this work on climate that you're talking about is really lovely, and would of course love to stay in touch about that and about, like you said, the transformative views that I know that you'll bring to your work. Thank you both so much. Really, I've enjoyed this tremendously, and I hope we'll continue the conversation.
Thank you so much.